So recently, an Antifa protester tried to, I don't know, assault Lauren Southern, and this was the video of it. And it was fascinating to hear what she was saying. Let's watch it. Jesus. Just crying, I love refugees. Nobody wants to be a refugee, dude. They're not just a homogenous block. They're all the same. They're just refugees. They're all the same. They're all the downtrodden, the oppressed. They're all great people. There's no one in there that is taking advantage of this. There's no one in there who has an ulterior motive or an agenda. Oh, no. These people are all very progressive. And I love it. I love refugees. Just the idea. Just that there's something pure about them because they're refugees. I mean, it really is Nietzschean slave morality, which I will do a proper video on at some point. Because it is quite incredible. The idea that because you are powerless, you are virtuous. Which is a fascinating concept. And I mean, I'm not saying anything new here, but like, I've been reading about it a lot recently, and it's very interesting how they can think this. But I love the fact that they're just stereotyping the entire group. I love refugees. Yeah, but what about the rapists? Do you love the rapists? What about the refugees that have raped and murdered actual like left-wing activists? Do you love them? Are they good people? What about a refugee who raped an 11-year-old boy in a bathroom because he was having a sexual emergency? What about one of these refugees who found a German couple in a tent and raped the woman and forced the man to watch? Do you love that refugee? If so, why? Why do you love that refugee? But that's the thing. They don't. They don't love refugees. What they have is a construct, an idea of what a refugee is. And to them, a refugee is a poor, downtrodden, innocent, hard-working, virtuous person. And they've projected this onto anyone who claims refugee status. This is the stereotype that they hold of a refugee. This is what a refugee is. It's not a person with their own goals and motivations, and sometimes good, sometimes bad. No. It's a fantasy. And so they go, I love refugees. That's them being virtuous. That's them being good, they think. They don't care about the consequences of this. They don't care about the fact that these people are not all the same. A refugee from Hungary or Ukraine is not the same as a refugee from Somalia. You know, they're not the same. There are differences in these people, and they refuse to accept that. And that, in my opinion, citing Christopher Hitchens, in fact, is what racism actually is. The inability to distinguish between types of people, groups of people. That is racism. That's the problem with racism as well. That's one of the problems. It's not just immoral, it's also inaccurate. It's just not an accurate way of representing the world. But imagine being dragged off a stage screaming, I love refugees, I love refugees. It's such a bad position to be in for a person to be a refugee, and then to have people who just treat you as if you were the eternal victims of the universe. Like you'll never accomplish anything. You'll always, I mean, once you're married to that idea as well, I love refugees. You don't want them to stop being refugees. In your opinion, it's good that they're refugees. You need them to continue to be refugees for you to be a good and moral person, because you're trying to help out the refugees. If they were not refugees, how would you show people you're a good person? How would you signal to the world that you had virtue? But like I said, they're not all the same. In fact, I'll give you an example.
It's a nonsense. I tell you one thing. Black and Asian people should come here in hundreds of millions. It's not right that for 500 years imperialism has looted our country of all our wealth, has destroyed our country. We will come here, we have been coming here, and we will continue to come here in hundreds of millions until indeed Gaddafi said Europe will turn black.
Okay, well, if you're going to try and change the demographic makeup of Europe, and that is actually your point, that is your mission, don't be surprised when Europe turns fascist. That's what's going to happen. And I don't want Europe to turn fascist. But then I don't want people to be mass replaced in their own countries, regardless of who's doing it. I don't want Westerners to go to African nations and supplant the African populations or Asian populations. I don't want Asians to come here and Africans to come here and supplant the native populations here. It seems like a deliberate attempt at, well, I mean, you could say genocide. You could actually say that is a call for genocide, to turn this continent different because of what you perceive to be a historical injustice. I mean, and the worst part is, right, there are so many consequences to this. For example, I don't want anything bad to happen. I don't want a genocide to occur. I genuinely don't want these things to happen. For many reasons, obviously. I don't want people dead. But also, if Europeans feel that they need to commit another genocide, which, again, I really am against, the consequences of that for the Europeans themselves is catastrophic. I mean, look at Germany. Germany is still, and will probably always, have this kind of guilt attached to it. And it's like, wow, that's inevitably bad. You know, the idea that we can conduct ethnic cleansing and everything will be okay after it. If you're part of the alt-right, you're a lunatic. What you're doing is consigning the white race to oblivion. If that's your opinion, you're a madman for wanting that, right? What we need is a system of incentives. Okay, that's what. And I think we can start by suggesting that halal slaughter is wrong, because it is. Gender segregation is also wrong. You can't segregate your mosques, because we've decided that gender segregation is immoral, and if you can't stand that, then there are other countries where you can do that, just not our ones. And we should just close the damn borders, because why the hell would we just let anyone in the world come to our countries just because they feel like it? I don't understand what the upshot of that is for the people who live here. The only reason I can think is that there are far left people going, I love refugees, because they secretly hate themselves, and they hate white people, and they think that the history of white people somehow warrants white people being wiped out. I don't really think that's true. I don't think anyone deserves to be wiped out, regardless of what the history is. So, we need to get a grip on this. You can't just love refugees, because refugees are people, and you don't know who they are. And no, Europe is not just going to turn black. It's actually going to turn awful, and then it's going to turn very white, because of how awful it became. And I really, really want to avoid that future. And it is possible to avoid that future, but it begins with being proud of our own cultures, being proud of our own values, and closing the borders.